The Pit Press Podcast.
Get a chance to see Ehrlicher, the linebacker, who they say has the potential to be the best defensive player they've ever had in New Mexico.
Looking down the middle, throwing into coverage, and it's picked off by New Mexico. You can hear the no, but Christian Washington says yes, yes, yes! Christian Washington! I don't need to take a knee. I want 6! Touchdown, New Mexico!
All right, welcome back to the Pit Press Podcast. My name is Ryan Tamori. Forgot my last name there for a second. As always, hey, we're keeping this college football train going. The next guest, the team that she covers, they start this Saturday. So I'm excited to talk about that. But as always, I am joined by the voice of Western New Mexico and the Lobo fan since 1970, Mr. Ed Nunez. Ed, hey, how are you?
Hey, Ryan, I'm doing well. Looking forward to talking to our next guest.
Yes. New Mexico State. You know what? Let me look it up. Hey, I didn't even do my due diligence there with with all the technical difficulties that I created for myself. New Mexico State football week 0 starts this Saturday, and the Aggies will host UMass 5 p.m. and the game is on ESPN. Our next guest, from everything I learned from her on KVIA's website, is a world traveler, and she ended up in El Paso of all places. I don't know if that's better or worse than Albuquerque. Terrible joke. She is a weekend anchor and reporter for KVIA down in El Paso, which is the ABC affiliate. She covers UTEP and NMSU, amongst other things. I think the USL team down there, the El Paso Locomotive FC, if I got that right. And she's Australian. She's from Brisbane. I hope I got that right. And I don't know if this is a bad thing, but I have to do it.
Knife.
That's a knife.
Wow.
Yes.
Just like every American there.
It was true. I wrote my thesis on the battle. I wrote my thesis at UNM on a battle in the Pacific during World War II. And I read something about how, U.S. Marines were in Melbourne, and I don't know. Obviously times have changed, but we're probably more obnoxious now. But let me get a better intro for her. Her name is Rachel Phillips. Thank you for the Paul Hogan joke. Thank you for joining us. And how are you today?
I'm doing good. And hey, I got to point out, you went 0 for 2 on pronunciations of cities in Australia. So you're off to a hot start here.
I figure, how do you pronounce it? How do you pronounce Brisbane and Melbourne?
Brisbane and Melbourne. You're pretty much saying Ben at the end of both of them, yeah. But you did the American pronunciation, so I'll let you off. I've heard it plenty of times now.
Hey, Ed, she probably wants to throw punch me. Sorry for.
We learned something though. I didn't know that.
No, I learned.
Yeah, you learn something new every day.
You do.
Glad
you do learn something every day. That was probably more offensive than the Crocodile Dundee joke. And I recently watched Tropic Thunder because it was its 15th anniversary. And God, do I love Robert Downey Jr. in that movie. He's a dude playing a dude disguised as another dude. I have to ask you, though, because you are in the profession that I pursued. How did you end up in sports journalism in America, in the United States of America?
Yeah, I wish I could say it's a great story. It's just really kind of random. Once I figured out I wanted to do journalism, a professor that I had a 3-week exchange with at Michigan State was like, oh, you should come back to the US. There's a couple of good schools. And one of them he recommended was ASU, the Cronkite School. So I went there, just kind of was like, why not? I'm young, may as well. I like America. I've been a few times, like sports, whatever. So came to America, got my master's in sports journalism. And then when I was graduating, I was like, I could either stay in the US or go back home. And I was just kind of like, why not, kind of thing as well. I mean, I honestly had never heard of El Paso until pretty much I was moving here, and just I'm a very go with the flow kind of person. So it was kind of like, yeah, sure, why not? I'll do that. As for sports, I've just always loved sports. So like that's never been a question for me. And I guess like the cool thing about the US compared to Australia when you're covering sports is that high school's treated like a pro sport, college is treated like a pro sport, and then you've got the level of pro sports as well. In Australia, you just have pro sports. There's no college sports at all. And then high school sports, you might cover like the rugby grand final for a high school, but you would never cover like what we do for like high school football here. So that in itself, like you're getting so much more experience because you've got 3 levels of professional sports. And I mean, the atmosphere is just awesome here.
That's a great answer. I love that. I am a degenerate gambler, and my friend and I discovered Australian football, the AFL.
Let me guess, during COVID?
No, like in the last
Oh,
like 6 months. I know that people fell in love with it during COVID because it was like the
yeah.
only thing that was on. And then I worked with guys at the Albuquerque Journal. Used to do a fantasy Australian football league back in the early 90s.
Wow.
And I knew nothing about it. And my friend and I, one night, I was at his house. We were watching baseball, and we were just perusing the channels, and we came across Fox Sports 1, and it was on. I absolutely fell in love with it, and I'm not being a typical American here. I did enjoy that the fact that okay, I got to say it right, North Melbourne. Did I say it right?
Yes, well done. Yep.
Yes, that they're the Kangaroos, and a
Yep.
former UNM basketball player named Hugh Greenwood, who is a pretty darn good point guard at the University of New Mexico, actually plays for them. So I was like,
Wow.
I wasn't even trying to be biased. I was just like, I love, and then I love the kangaroo thing, and I love their logo. So I was like, that is my AFL
That's my
team.
team. Yeah, there you go.
Oh, yeah.
There's a few Americans over there. There's Mason Cox who plays for Collingwood, I think, and he's really, really good for them.
I know that they're like one of the best teams in the league.
Yeah.
But do you have a favorite team? And being that you are Australian, is it better than American football?
I do have a favorite team. So AFL, it's the Brisbane Lions, which is where I'm from. Rugby, I go for a team not from my area. And I do watch it still constantly. Is it better than American? It's different. I don't know. It's hard. Like, it's always going to be the sports I grew up with, right? I think they're always going to hold like a special place in your heart. But kind of going back to what we were talking about before, the atmosphere of like an NFL game or a college football game, just the fact that you get like, 100,000 fans in for a college football game is wild to me. Whereas, in Australia, I think the biggest stadium is like 80,000. So just that difference is kind of nuts, but it's different. It's great. I love pretty much every sport. So I don't know if I can, it's like picking your favorite kids, right? But I love every sport.
Yeah, people ask me that all the time, and I say 1A and 1B, and I don't know how to answer that. The way I've described Australian football is the fact that it's like American football, which isn't fair, but it's like American football, and the field is massive. It's like American football, field hockey, and soccer football, what the rest of the world calls football, all combined into one. I don't know. I loved it. I haven't watched it in a couple weeks, but I absolutely loved it. To me, it was the funnest thing to watch. And not only that, they play 20-minute quarters, and I don't know. I'm sure the guys are a lot tougher than us Americans.
They run constantly. Like the amount of kilometers or miles they do in a game is just wild.
No, it blows my mind. I appreciate those answers, and thank you again. I'm saying repeat.
I will happily talk about Australian sports anytime. So
Perfect.
No,
no, I appreciate that, and thank you for the I'm saying it again. Thank you for letting me throw in the "That's Not a Knife" from Crocodile Dundee. But switching gears to New Mexico State, they won a bowl game last year, and I'm here to be. I can't believe I'm saying this. I'm here to be an objective journalist. My opinion, though, and this is not a UNM thing, it's just a very New Mexican thing to me. They acted like they won a national championship or a Super Bowl, but obviously getting to the bowl game, they were really happy that they won. Had you I know you're fairly new to that and covering that area, but had you ever seen a team celebrate like that and they went like 7-6 or 6-6? And to add to that question, I'm sure Las Cruces was very, very happy.
Yeah, Las Cruces was very, very happy. I don't know. I mean, look, I understand. Yeah, they maybe went a bit overboard, but when you look at how they started the season going 0-4, they didn't know who their quarterback was. It was just really a mess those first few games. To actually have managed to get to a bowl game and then win it in Jerry Kill's first season, it was pretty cool. Like, it was a pretty massive moment for that team, and especially when they've only been to, I think it's like 6 bowl games in the history of the entire school. Like, it means more, right? If you're a Notre Dame or a UCLA or a USC or Oregon or whatever, you could name so many different teams that getting to a bowl game is like, yeah, that's what is expected of them every year. that was never expected of NMSU last year. Like, I think especially when they went 0-4, everyone's like, oh, great, this is another wash. Probably get one win on the season. It'll be the FCS or the Div 2 school that they play, and that'll be it. And then somehow to kind of turn things around. So, yeah, they might have, carried on a little bit, but I don't know. It was a pretty cool moment for them and for the program, I think, especially with, you can see everything else that was going on outside of the program at the time. It was kind of a big win for the school as a whole.
That's another thing. I didn't write that down. Could you elaborate on that with how important that bowl game win was? Because obviously Greg Heyer and that whole situation and UNM, and then I think the baseball coach got fired. I mean, can you elaborate on that? And maybe it seems to always be a basketball state and a basketball school, and I don't know what I'm trying to ask right now, but I mean, that has to elevate Jerry Kill as well, his status in Las Cruces, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, honestly, people love Jerry Kill from the jump, and he's a pretty easy guy to love. Like, when you talk to him as a reporter, you're always going to get a good soundbite. Like, he kind of knows what to say. He's quite funny in how he says it, and you're like, yep, that's the soundbite I'm using today. He's an engaging guy, and I think he kind of got the whole community behind him, especially as they kind of went on that run towards the end. But yeah, I think for the entire Las Cruces community, it was something kind of nice and happy, especially when there was a lot kind of going on off of and within sports, but off of the court or the field or whatever. Obviously, one of the NMSU basketball players was involved in a deadly shooting at the UNM campus, and there's a lot that kind of transpired after that we didn't even know about at the time when the bowl game was happening. Obviously, then there was those sexual assault allegations within the basketball team that came to light that had, according to the players, been going on for months. So, we didn't know at the time when that bowl game was happening. All we knew about was the shooting, but that was also going on behind the scenes. So it was, I think probably one of the only bright spots in regards to NMSU athletics last year was NMSU going to a bowl game and winning it. So yeah, certainly a moment for them. And I think it did definitely kind of, I mean, Jerry Kill is the guy kind of in that athletics program. Like, all the new coaches that are coming in, like, they meet him, he comes to their press conferences. Like, it's a big deal. I think that's, pretty common at most schools. The football coach is kind of the main guy around there.
Ed will have some questions for you about Jerry Kill and what he means to that program. But obviously the big thing this year, and this is great for NMSU. Let me backtrack. This is great for NMSU. It's not the Jeff Grammer UNM NMSU or whatever he posts on Twitter. Them being in the Aggies being in Conference USA, how does that help them this season and even coming off that bowl win?
Yeah, I think it's massive. I mean, that decision made a couple of years ago was completely for football, right? They've been an independent for the last few years, and that's hard. I mean, unless you are one of those few schools who's been doing it for years, it's hard. NMSU was never meant to be an independent, and they had to go that way. And so then kind of joining CUSA is a big deal for them. And I think, a really cool thing for us here in the Borderland is that they're back in the same conference as UTEP. It's the first time, I think, in over 50 or 60 years they've been in the same conference. So that Battle of I-10 rivalry that we usually have as a non-conference game is now a conference game, which adds more pressure. But I mean, just when we talk about all the TV rights that come along with CUSA, I mean, NMSU are playing on ESPN to start their season. I think I saw something on Twitter the other day that to watch USC on this weekend, you have to go to like the Pac-12 network. NMSU is going to have probably more viewers than USC, which is kind of just a wild stat to begin with. And that's because they're in Conference USA. So it's a massive move for the school to be able to be playing teams, and it's easier for them to get a schedule together because they've got those conference games already lined up. And then on top of that, you're getting the broadcast deals and the rights and stuff. One thing that is kind of interesting that USA is doing, obviously, to get those broadcast rights is we've got some Wednesday games throughout the season, which is, I mean, not ideal, I think, for fans. Obviously, it's hard to get to a game on a Wednesday night compared to a Saturday. But I think when you think about how much money and revenue that's bringing in because it's on TV and ESPN or ESPN Plus or any of the ESPN channels, it's certainly a good move for all the schools within CUSA.
You mentioned, Rachel, you mentioned Jerry Kill, what an easy guy he is to like. The New Mexico State's football culture, along with New Mexico, it hasn't been good for a long time. Now, Coach Kill had experience in Minnesota, had some health issues. But I think one of the main questions I want to ask, how did Coach Jerry Kill, change the football culture at New Mexico State? How did he change it?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't here before Kill was here. So I started when Kill started. So I don't have a lot of experience in what it was like before. I've heard stories, different things. But Kill is just one of those guys that leads from the front. Like, his expectations are very clear. You walk into football practice, and on the big screen, there's a list of all his hard hat, lunch pail things that he expects out of his team every single day. And I mean, they can be really simple things. One thing they added this year is to love football, which, I mean, if you're playing college football, you'd hope you love football. But I mean, that's a key thing. Like, hey, you got to love what you're doing out here, because you're coming and busting your butts out here to get to work. Like, you need to love what you're doing. Otherwise, why are you playing this game? So his keys are really simple, and they're out there every day, and the expectations are known amongst all the players. So it was like, I think the other thing was it pretty much was an entirely new roster last year. Like, there was only a few guys that stayed around from the year before. So Jerry kind of got to lay the law, like, this is how we do things here. You either step in line and follow it, or you move on. And everyone, as we saw throughout the season, stepped in line. And I mean, they believed in him, and he believed in them. And I think they have such a good relationship, the players and the coaches. I mean, Jerry Kill got a massive tattoo, and I mean massive, on his arm, and it says NMSU Quick Lane Bowl Champions 2022. And he made a bet with the guys the week of the game, saying, if you win, I'll go get a tattoo. Like, that's how much I believe in you guys, and that's how much I'm proud of this team. And he kind of says it's been the most pivotal team to him in his entire career. And I mean, you talked about the places he's been, the coaches he's played with, and whatever else, but for him to kind of get his second chance, I guess, after all of his health issues, and be able to turn this team around and do something that no one expected, it was meant so much to him that, yeah, he got the tattoo. So there's a really great relationship you see between the players and the coaches, and all the players really respect Jerry and everything he brings to the program.
Well, it was a great first season. It really was, and yeah, he did a great job. You mentioned the Quick Lane Bowl win from last year. They're coming off a bowl win. What are the expectations for this year's team in Las Cruces?
Yeah, I mean, to put it simply, what he kind of says is they just want to be better this year. I mean, they want to go to another bowl game. They want to win again. Like, it's pretty clear what they want to do. I actually asked him, we had a press conference just earlier today. I asked him, obviously last year there were no expectations of the team and what they could do. How's the team kind of handling the expectations this season? Because obviously people are expecting them to do better and kind of continue to win and maybe go to back-to-back bowl games. And kind of produce that kind of a season. And he said, we haven't changed anything. Like, we're not talking about it as a program. Like, yeah, the kids are the kids. So obviously they're out there, they hear the stuff. But he's like, for us, like, we're following the same patterns as what we did last year. Like, he's like, I expect these guys to come in and work and us work together and be a team. And I mean, he expects them to be a better team this year. So that's the big thing. And now it's whether they can actually go and produce that.
Expectations are even higher than, as you mentioned, there's expectations written down. When everybody walks in, they know what they are. Good first season for Coach Kill. Well, what did that win against UNM last year mean for New Mexico State, for the program? I know what it meant as a Lobo fan here in Albuquerque. Coach Gonzalez has made it clear too. Danny's a great guy. Coach Kill's a great guy, but Coach Gonzalez has made it clear he doesn't like the Aggies, and he shouldn't, right? He shouldn't like them. But what did the win mean for New Mexico State against UNM last year?
Yeah, I mean, every win is big, but when it's a rivalry win, it's just even bigger. And obviously, at the end of the day, when you look at kind of NMSU getting to that bowl game, they needed every single one of those wins they got. So it kind of adds that extra thing. I think for them, like I said, there weren't that many returners, so there weren't that many guys who knew what it was like to be a part of that rivalry and play in that game. But they had some guys come in who were former Aggies who played in those games, come and talk to them and kind of amp them up and make them understand kind of what that game was all about. And yeah, I think it meant a lot to them in the run to kind of going to the Quick Lane Bowl. And obviously this year it'll be interesting to see how things go again. They'll be heading up there, which is a different story altogether. I think certainly when you're playing on your home turf in such a rivalry like that, it makes things a little bit easier. So I think that rivalry will be kicked up another notch this year.
Yeah, no question about it. Well, besides quarterback Diego Pavia, great story about him today in the Albuquerque Journal. What are some who are some other Aggie players we should keep an eye on?
Yeah, I think the cool thing about the offense, obviously they do return Diego, which is massive for them, but they return so many key pieces on offense, especially when you look at their running back. They've got 3 players back there, Star Thomas, Monte Watkins, and my third player, Jamani Jones. The 3 of them, they were like, I called them a 3-headed monster the other day when I did a story about them, because the 3 of them all kind of bring something different. when in their running game, and that's so pivotal. So when you chuck them in and out in between plays, or even have a couple of them on the field at the same time, the defense, it's really hard for them to read. So expect them to kind of have another big year. The three of them had a big year last year, and then I think being back together again, it's just going to go stronger again. And then same with wide receivers. I mean, they returned Cordell David and Jonathan Brady as well, who both had good years. Thomas Whitford as well is another one at tight end who can play some really good minutes, and he has good connections with Diego. So I think the cool thing for NMSU on offense is they've got so many of their key pieces back that really it's like, okay, we learned the system last year. We clearly started to get better towards the end of the year, but now we have a whole another year underneath our belts of experience, of expectations, of playing together, knowing each other's games. And I assume they're going to be pretty powerful in offense this season, even more than last year.
Sounds like they've got some good players on both sides of the ball. Here's a question, because it's been tough to fill Memorial Stadium with fans. They've never really, for rivalry games, UTEP and New Mexico State, and some conference games, they've had some good crowds. Has the Aggie success from last season translated into more season tickets being sold?
I don't have the numbers on season tickets, but I've got to imagine so. I mean, when they won the Quick Lane Bowl, they had a parade in kind of the downtown area of Las Cruces, and there were thousands of fans out there. And I mean, yes, they're probably the hardcore fans that are at those games week in, week out. But I mean, to have that many people turn out for a parade where, it's just them showing a trophy. I mean, you're not watching a game, but to have so many people come out and celebrate that moment, you have to imagine that build a lot more of a community there among the football program. And the thing is like, for NMSU, they were up against it last year because they've been a losing program for so many of the recent years that it's hard to get behind a team. It's like, why are we going to go watch a team that's just going to lose tonight? No matter how much of a hardcore fan you are, it's never fun watching your team lose. So why are you going to put yourself through that? So as the season rolled on and they started winning games, you started to see the crowds get bigger because it's like, okay, our team's doing well. Let's go support them. And I just think that's going to be even more so this year. I think obviously everyone this first weekend is excited for football to be back week 0. I'm sure there's going to be a good crowd out on hand, nice 5 p.m. start for the Aggies this year. So I think this week will be a big crowd. And then, if they win that game, I think we'll start to see them build again, because then you've got that winning coming back in.
Some excitement around the program, no question about it. You live in UTEP. Now, Ryan and I debated this. Is UNM a bigger rivalry for the Aggies, or is it UTEP?
Ooh. I mean, for me, from what I see, I would have to say UTEP, right? But that's because I'm in this area. Tough. I think now that UTEP and NMSU are in the same conference, I think that notches it above NMSU and UNM, because now it's a conference game on the line as well as just that rivalry. What do you guys think, though?
You know what? I thought it was UTEP. Because they're all that. I thought it was UTEP, Ryan. I think you thought it was UNM, but you just mentioned something that's key. Now that they're in the same conference, I would. You don't want to lose to your conference rival. It's even more ramped up. I-40 down the way. What, 40 miles away from Las Cruces? UTEP is.
Yeah, 45-minute drive. I don't know how many miles that is, but yes, 45-minute drive.
Right now, I just mentioned that ramped it up a little bit. We don't expect you to delve into it too much. What can you tell us about the Miners this year, the UTEP Miners?
Yeah, I mean, it's just interesting. You look at kind of the CUSA rankings that came out. They had NMSU at 5, UTEP at 6, and that caused a lot of tense energy around the borderland. My boss is a big UTEP fan. He's like, I just don't understand. And I was like, well, I mean, NMSU went to a bowl game last year and they won it. UTEP, they had a lot of expectations on their shoulders last year to go to back-to-back bowl games for the first time in 17 years. And they fell short. They went 5-7. And I think they disappointed themselves. They had the team to kind of go to a bowl game and they couldn't make it happen. So, this year that's what they want to do. They also have a lot of starters back. They've got a 4-year QB starter in Gavin Hardison. They've got their leading wide receiver in Tyrene Smith there. They've got running back Dion Hinkins. And then on defense, they've got guys like Tyrese Knight and Praise Amohuehi who, potentially could have NFL prospects around their name. So they've got a lot of depth and they got a lot of experience. And it's kind of that year for them because of COVID. You've got a lot of those 5th-year kind of seniors hanging around. And we were joking around at practice yesterday. Some of those guys are like, I feel like an old man right now. I've just been doing this for so long. And it's true. They have been doing it for so long. But that is kind of the strength, is that they know what to do. And now it's their last runs. They really want to make it special. So, I mean, Dana Dimmel, it's his 6th year at the helm of UTEP. He said to me yesterday, this is the best team he's ever had at UTEP. So if you go off that, if you trust what a coach is saying, then they're going to be a good team. It's just, I think for both NMSU and UTEP, it's handling expectations. And I think this time around, NMSU have so much on their shoulders. People expect a lot from them this season because, of what they did last year. Whereas UTEP, there's not much talk about them nationally, whereas last year there was. So for them, they're kind of coming in under the radar, which I think kind of suits UTEP a lot better this season. So we'll see how things go. They open up on the road against Jacksonville State, a conference opponent as well. So they've got an interesting kind of matchup in week 0 as well. So to have a conference opponent in week 0, I think is pretty tough, but we'll see how they go with that one.
They're also underdogs in that game. They are a 1 point. I mean, it's essentially a pick 'em, but they're the 1 point underdog. As for the rivalry, I just base it on basketball. I'm trying to think. This is where I'm nerding out. I'm showing my age, and even though I'm still a young guy. The last time I can remember that UTEP was in the NCAA basketball tournament, I think was my senior year of high school, which was 2005. Don't quote me on that, but I think that I would think because of proximity, if you asked Aggie fan, they would be like, yeah, the Miners are probably the bigger rivalry. I just think with NMSU and the success they had before you were in the El Paso area, I would say it was UNM NMSU because of basketball, but I could be wrong on that. I mean,
I think my perspective changes when I think about basketball or football. I think football, I think UTEP NMSU, and basketball, I think NMSU UNM, which is interesting because UTEP, they haven't been a dominant force in basketball for years. So
that is a fair assessment. I have one more question, and I'm sorry I'm backtracking. Diego Pavia went to my high school, and then he transferred to Volcano Vista. He went he went to St. Pius. Volcano Vista, again, showing my age, Ed. Volcano Vista didn't exist when I was in high school and when I graduated, but he's a St. Pius, if you've ever heard of it, St. Pius there in Albuquerque. So he's a Pius guy. So I have love for him. And then I really, truly respect what he did at NIMI. I thought that was a great story. But I had heard this week that he's got a little bit of an arrogance, that he's a very, I shouldn't say arrogance, that he's a very confident guy. Have you seen that? And I mean, I'm sure that his teammates love that.
Yeah, it's exactly what you want in a quarterback, right? I mean, if your quarterback's quiet and he's like, oh yeah, whatever, it's like, how can you trust that guy to lead the team? Diego, no one's beating him out for that spot. Like, that's his mentality. He's like, it's my spot. I'm the guy for the job. And he thought that last fall camp when it was him and Gavin Frakes kind of going at it. He was like, Gavin's good, we'll have a good battle, but I think it's going to be me. Like, I know what I can bring to this team. And he's always kind of had that mindset. He has that fight in him, like that kind of dog in him. And like I said, you want that in your quarterback, right? You want the guy that always wants to win and hates losing, and that's Diego Pavia. So I think that energy is massive, and he really came into his own as the season kind of rolled on last season. It was kind of back and forth between him and Frakes, and he really found his footing, and the entire team believes in him. I was speaking to some of the O-line last week, and they were like, yeah, he's our guy. Like, we know he's going to, as long as we block for him, like, he's going to be able to get it done for us.
I just think, a lot of people are going to disagree with me. And honestly, it's been sad to see NMSU be as bad at football as they were for so many years. I like the rejuvenation, and I just don't think it's good for the state, but it's good for UNM. And it's probably good for UTEP. I mean, that has to be good for UTEP, but she is an anchor and a sports reporter down in El Paso at KVIA. That's the ABC affiliate there. We can't thank you for your time enough, Miss Rachel Phillips. Thank you so much for talking a little bit of NMSU and UTEP football. We appreciate you. Thank you so much.
No, of course. Thanks so much for having me on, guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry for all the piss poor Australian jokes.
No, that made me laugh. People make those jokes all the time, but I've never had someone actually set it up to go on a podcast. That was quite funny.
I just thought about it today because my friend and I always, we just say it. We were saying it when we were watching Australian football. We were like, hey, that's not a knife. That's a knife. So thank you very much. Are you going to be up in Albuquerque for the football game, for the NMSU UNM game?
I am thinking about pitching it to my station. Just depends. They're not great with letting us travel.
Right. No, I get it. I was just curious. I might bug you the week of. We're going to do a whole shebang up here, and we're going to actually, cool. We've had Danny Gonzalez, head coach at UNM. We've had him on, but because it's NMSU, we're going to sit down with him and and on camera at the football stadium. So we're trying to blow that week out of the water. But we appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you
No, of
so
course.
much.
Thanks,
Very
guys.
nice meeting you. Love
Lovely.
the accent. Love the
Thank
accent,
you.
man. All right.
Let me check
Lovely
Sean.
meeting you both.
All right, we go from an Australian Michigan State grad, or at least an alumni, and she said she went there, Rachel Phillips. Our next guest, I love this guy. Even though I applied for the position, he's got it. There's no animosity. I absolutely love talking to this guy. It reminds me of me when I was with a shout out to my boy Isaac Avaluseo when I was at the Daily Lobo. And I think he's wise beyond his years. But he's a Michigan State University grad. He's worked at the Daily Telegram, the State News, the Monacan Island Town Crier. I hope I got that right. He is from Michigan, and now he's the semi-new assistant to the sports editor of the Albuquerque Journal. He covers UNM football at golf, but we're not having him on for golf. And for those of you watching the on the stream on YouTube, the recording, we had some technical difficulties. But Sean Reider from the Albuquerque Journal is joining us. Sean, how are you? It's been a while. Thank you for joining us here at the Pit Press Podcast.
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on, guys.
You obviously have only been here 8 months, but I'm sure you've heard the lore, and I've talked to you at practice. If any, what have you heard about Rocky Long, and what can you take away from him? I know he's gone, but what have you heard, and what have you liked that you've heard?
About Rocky, I mean, obviously, he took UNM to very stable ground. And to be honest with you, I probably was a little too young for the heyday of the true Rocky Long era. But he's revered in these parts in a lot of different ways. Obviously, with time passing since he left, and he's revered too for being a great defensive mind. The 3-3-5, as we know it, a defense that's becoming more and more in vogue as each season goes on. That is the guy that laid the groundwork for it. So definitely have only really ever heard good things about Rocky. But yeah.
Sean is up. You wrote an extensive article yesterday in yesterday's Albuquerque Journal. As camp closes out, what has been your biggest takeaway so far from what you have seen?
That's a really good question. And I think it comes down to what I was looking to see in camp. I was looking more than anything to see how the offensive line was going to play out. It was, Danny in a press conference before fall camp, he said that was his biggest question. And it was honestly kind of mine too. Wanted to see, what level of stability they get, how deep that room could actually be. Because, if you don't have 10 offensive linemen that could play, and hold up, it could end up being a long season. And I think the offensive line has been a pleasant surprise. Remains largely unchanged from the spring, except for the left guard spot. Torian Tito Stafford, the Alabama State transfer, he is now essentially the starter at left guard. He's looked good doing so. He kind of won that job out in the second scrimmage of camp. But I think it's a more stable line. I think it's more reliable. Cam Blankenship, the offensive line coach, he told me, when we got in here and we were trying to install things, he's like, it was kind of rough because you're going up against the 3-3-5 and you never really know where you're going to get it from on any given day. But he was pretty pleased with where they were at. I know Danny's pretty excited with where they're at too. They haven't had the most reliable offensive line. Beyond that too, I just wanted to see how transfers were going to play out. The guy that stood out to me more than anything was Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, another Alabama State transfer. To me, he's in front of the running back room. I feel very good about him being one of the starters going out to Texas A&M. But he can play. He's a violent runner. He's good in pass protection. He's smooth running down the field. He can catch the ball. I think people are going to like where he's coming from. And I just wanted to see too, how the defense would play out as well. I think there's a lot of different pieces, a lot of interesting pieces, and there's not a lot of true standout guys in the sense of maybe, not to use this example, but like an Urlacher or something like that. But there's a lot of really good steady presences. Guys like Dante Martin, Sire Riley, Ray Lutelli, Alec Marenka. that linebacker core is really solid. And then seeing some new pieces too, like Noah Gates, one of the Wolf safeties. And then just seeing Tavian Combs return too. I had never seen him play in person before, and this camp was my first opportunity to do so.
Yeah, you mentioned that we had some questions, and you mentioned both sides of the ball, and so we're going to ask you the next question. You mentioned yesterday in the article, freshman quarterback Aiden Armenta turned in his, quote, sharpest team periods, close quote, so far. Does he have a chance to share the backup spot, the starting quarterback Dylan Hopkins? There's other quarterbacks in the mix. You made that clear too, but when I read that, I wanted to ask you that question.
Honestly, I mean, I'd still say we're pretty early in evaluating Armenta. With freshman quarterbacks, coming in, it is his first true college action in this camp. And I really wanted to wait until I saw enough out of him before I really wrote. And by enough out of him, I meant a couple team periods. And I thought he was good on Saturday. I really think he was. I think, though, just, with Devin Dampier and with DC, that was a job that was supposed to be decided not this last Saturday, but the Saturday before that. And that's what Danny indicated. I think we've seen enough out of both these guys to figure out who the backup's going to be. And to be honest with you, DC's kind of played his way back into backup contention. It's not like it was the largest gap to begin with, but it felt like Dampier had the leg up for a good period. DC, I give him credit. He's turned in some solid practices, really been stacking it together. So I still think it's going to be between Devin and DC for the backup spot. But how Armenta, where he ends up on the first depth chart or the first couple depth charts, will be really interesting to watch.
Sophomore defensive end Destin Gaynor is turning into a problem for the first and second team units. What can you tell us and UNM fans about him?
He's just been solid. He's just a guy that, the defensive line was a question to me too, kind of coming into camp, or I should say defensive front, really. You got good pieces, Gabe Lopez, the Washington State transfer, the mid-year transfer. He's really fast. He's really aggressive. He's taken on a little bit of an ownership role in that room. It's been noticeable. Bryce Santana's been solid. Kyler Drake, I thought he had not a night and day kind of fall camp compared to the spring, but it's clear he stepped it up. He's really fun to talk to as well. And he kind of broke down what his mentality was about coming into me. Gaynor's just, a guy that was maybe not unheralded, but, didn't have a ton of reps last year, didn't have a ton of game action. And he didn't totally shine in the spring, but, he's kind of carved out a role in the rotation from the defensive line. And I don't know if that's the hardest position to carve out a role in the rotation, but the fact that he's doing it and the fact that he's been as solid as he has been over the last week of camp in particular was definitely, to me, really noticeable.
It was said that this was the first camp in a long, long time that the offense challenged the defense, and I was there for that alongside with you, that scrimmage on Saturday morning, and that was really pleasant to see. What can you tell us about what you saw and maybe what this offense can do in 2023?
I probably misrepresented it a little bit, at least Saturday's scrimmage in the sense. It was straight up. With the exception of maybe 15 plays or so, it really was essentially, twos and threes going at each other all day, all morning, I should say. Just getting after it and, in an effort to cultivate depth. The fact to me that, they're resting their starting quarterback, they're starting running backs, they're starting wide receivers for the most part, they're starting the offensive line. I think that's a really big tell. I asked Danny, how often has he ever been able to do that in New Mexico? And he said, yeah, we've never been able to do this because we haven't had guys established like that. And I think that's a really positive sign. I think if you're a fan, you should be maybe not excited, but at least heartened a little bit that things have kind of gotten to that point. I don't know how this offense completely pans out throughout the season. I don't know if they are, absolutely lighting up scoreboards everywhere, because that's also not really what this offense is kind of built to do. It's kind of a balanced offense more than anything. But I think the thing that things are trending towards that point, and that you have a lot of set spots in the offense, and they're pretty reliable players as well filling those spots. I think that should be something that people should be, looking forward to at the very least.
You mentioned this about we're going to ask you again, just maybe I'm going to ask this a different way. along with wide receiver Jeremiah Hickson and left guard Terrion Stafford, running back Jacoby Krosky-Merritt is a transfer from Alabama State. You kind of touched on it a little bit, but one more question on this, Sean. You mentioned you thought he could be an all-conference performer, and you mentioned a little bit of reasons why. Can maybe you backtrack and say the reasons why you think that?
You talking about Krosky-Merritt?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't remember writing about whether or not he'd be an all-conference performer or not. I just, more or less to me, it's just clear he's at the front of the room.
Maybe that's what you meant. Sorry about that. That's what you meant. Yeah.
You're good. Yeah, you're good. I mean, it's clear he's at the front of the room. To me, at the very least. I mean, Danny said that he is, one of the top two. I don't totally believe that he's two at this point, especially not with Andrew Henry kind of dealing with a little bit of a high ankle sprain. That's kind of tough to kind of work through in some ways, although he's been progressing well in practice. But back to the point, I mean, he's just an aggressive runner. It doesn't seem like anything has really caught him off guard, which has been kind of impressive. I mean, he is an up transfer, and at every level it is football. But I mean, from day one, I mean, just kind of turn heads and just hit gaps and pound it. And just kind of a relentless running style, a very violent running style, a very aggressive running style. It just stands out when you see it. And he's going up against a pretty solid run defense as well. So just to see that keep happening, on ones in first team action, to me was really interesting. And, definitely something that I think fans can probably bank on seeing this fall.
I'm looking forward to seeing him. One of the things that you mentioned in your article yesterday, Coach Gonzalez mentioned not hitting what seems to be the proverbial wall at this point in camp. Can you expand upon that?
Yeah, I mean, camp's a grind. I mean, camp is long. It's a lot of guys getting beat up and kind of going 6 days a week. You get kind of one day off. You got a ton of meetings. I mean, it is your life. I remember talking to Devin Dampier about this. I was like, I asked him how his spring was, and then I asked him, how camp was for the first time. He's like, I'm going to be honest with you. He's like, I knew it was going to be a lot. I just didn't think it would be this much. It's not like they're running, Junction Boys era practices where, it's like borderline, like insane, conditions and the like. But I mean, it's a lot. It wears people down, and it's hard for teams to kind of get through that. I think you see the case, doesn't matter if it's NFL or college or even high school 2 days or whatever. It's kind of tough. And, the one thing that, Danny always kept saying, he's like, I really think we only had one kind of bad practice where we kind of took a step back, and that was the second day of camp. It was our first day outside. It was 98 degrees. I mean, I kind of had to get on guys to, focus back in a little bit. And that really didn't have to happen a lot. And you ended a lot of practice by saying, yeah, I was really happy for our competitive effort today, and I was really happy with the level of engagement from the players in the field. And that was pretty clear. And I think a lot of guys, Sire Riley in particular, he said it was the fact that, the offense was competing with the defense for the first time in his tenure at New Mexico. That was something that engaged guys and kept guys coming back every day, looking to get better.
When you said Junction Boys, I thought of that movie and Tom Berenger going, "We're going to work now," or he says something like that. I'm going to have to find that clip. Sean,
that's an unbelievable movie.
I remember watching. I remember watching it on ESPN. I know that you already kind of probably answered this on. Actually, you did answer this on your podcast with Jeff Grammer. Which, by the way, if you haven't listened to that, go to the Journal's website and do that. Sean, not only did I push that, I also subscribe to the Journal, and I'm paying your salary. But what is your prediction for this football team this season, UNM? Because I see it going both ways. And I'm saying it on record now. I've just realized that every head coach at UNM is not Mike Loxley. And that goes back, and you and I were talking about that on the field, I think, the other day. I've gotten to know Danny somewhat, and I really like him. And I think he is a genuine guy. I mean, winning is good for everybody. If they can win every year people are going to buy the paper. People maybe listen to us. People are going to watch TV. It's going to be more seats. It's a financial gain for UNM. Winning cures all. But I can see this season going one of two ways, two ways. And one of those two ways is they go 1-11 or they go 6-6. But your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't see 1-11. I really don't. I don't see 2-10. I really have a hard time doing it. I mean, if Dylan Hopkins is injured, if DJ Washington is injured, if Alec Marengo, if Texas A&M just takes out half the team in the first game, I guess you could put it on the table. I don't see 1-11. Even I think in a season where a lot of things go really, really wrong with everything on the field that they have right now and the coaching stuff that they kind of have right now, I think the bottom is 3. I don't see it getting worse than that. And even if it's one win over last year and it's still not a great season, it still is better than what last season was. So that is kind of my floor prediction. Feeling, I've been flipping and flopping a little bit back between like 7 and 6. I could see it. The thing that heartens me is that we're going to see how teams like UNLV and San Jose State kind of pan out. UNLV is a really big question mark. They had 1 vote to win the Mountain West.
They sure did.
And honestly, I can't even mock that guy because that guy legit. I forgot who did it. Somebody wrote a story on him voting for that, and it was a very clear, rational explanation, and it wasn't like a fan just kind of randomly got a vote and said, "Oh, let's do this." I see what he said. With the go-go offense from Brennan Marion and things kind of coming together on defense with them under Odom and the fact that they have some interesting returners. They were 1 win away from a bowl last year. They could be really interesting. But, in San Jose State too, they have a really tough non-con. But we'll see how they pan out throughout the season because I'm not sure there's enough there for them to make it back to a title game perhaps, but they could be interesting. With that being said, to get back to my point, they represent 2 of the home games that UNM has this season. And right now, I think they're going to be competitive in every single home game. I think that home slate is Tennessee Tech, New Mexico State, San Jose State, UNLV. I am blanking on it's Utah State, and then it's Hawaii. I think Hawaii is a win there. I think New Mexico is just a better team than they are right now. I think Utah State could be very competitive. I think UNLV could be competitive. Just down the line, I think they could be in every single game. And even if you split there, that's 3 wins right there. And then you go on the road and you play you're playing a Nevada team that isn't very good. They have some interesting defensive transfers, but overall the roster is not in great health. And I don't know. And then you go to UMass, which is terrible. And I know it's a far game, but I think New Mexico at the very least has a talent edge over them right now and the cohesiveness that they kind of need. I guess I would probably say that my ceiling right now is 6 wins, and I think a lot of people would take that.
Mm-hmm.
Be in between what I kind of feel that they're at is probably around 5 wins.
Backtracking and focusing on, we're inching closer to Texas A&M and Labor Day weekend. What? I don't want to say moral victory. I don't want to say this, but they're 38-point underdogs. You put $100 on the Lobos to win, you'd win $400,000. What do you want to see out of them in College Station?
I think I'll kind of go to what Danny said. And I asked him this today at practice. He mentioned, earlier before fall camp that he felt that when they played at A&M in 2021, that it was a lot of guys that were really excited to go down to A&M, but they really weren't actually excited to play the game. And I asked him, do you feel that you have a group right now that's 2 weeks out, a little bit under, that is excited to play that game? And he said, I really do. I think we do. So I think, just seeing how this defense holds up against an offense that honestly, I haven't delved deep into A&M yet. I'm going to be curious to see what it's like with the personnel they have. And obviously Petrino kind of running the shows. I think he's calling plays. I'm pretty sure he is. But we'll see if that plays out. I'm curious to see how his defense holds up and how they can match with a team that is a top 25 team. I had them, I think, 24 in my AP ballot. And I think that's a pretty reasonable vote for them. I think they ended up 23 in the actual poll. And then just seeing obviously everybody's going to be kind of locked in on the offense. And it might not be the prettiest thing in the world. They're going up against a pretty stout defense, but I know you kind of brought up the point. You never want to call it a moral victory, but I think getting in there and covering that 38-point spread would kind of do a lot for people to see, okay, like, there might be something here worth watching.
I think this game is, paraphrasing always what Mike Tyson said, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And I think for myself, maybe you and a lot of other Lobo fan, I would love to see them go into College Station and punch them in the mouth. And I cannot wait to hear what the Yell leaders, what crappy jokes they have to tell about UNM on at the midnight yell after App State last year. And I'm sure you're well aware of that. Just switching gears to NMSU real quick. You had a story about quarterback Diego Pavia down for the Aggies. What do you make of him? What was it like talking to him? I've heard, not from you, not from just Rachel Phillips, who we had on. He's got I don't know if it's an arrogance, but he's got an aura of confidence around him. And I think New Mexico State, especially with Jerry Kill, they obviously have some confidence going into the season. What did you gather from your visit down in Cruces?
Yeah, I mean, on Diego in particular, Diego's always been fun to talk to. I covered that Quick Lane Bowl in Detroit, in my home state. And, one of the images I always remember is Diego, after stealing the game with those 2 first down runs, where it was very clear he was never, ever going to run out of bounds, not even step out of bounds. He never thought he was going to do that. We're in the bowels of Ford Field. He's practically pounding the table, at the podium or whatever. And he's saying, like, recruit New Mexico. This is why you recruit New Mexico, yada, yada, yada. He's got a chip on his shoulder. I think a lot of NMSU has a chip on their shoulder right now in particular. This is kind of uncharted waters. They're back in a conference. There are expectations that they're going to be pretty decent in the conference. And like I wrote in the story, what Pavia told me is like, people have high expectations, but I think we have higher expectations. And I'm just curious to see how it all plays out. I mean, I can't speak to NMSU with the same level of, confidence that I can with kind of UNM to a degree. But, Diego kind of steering the ship there is a really interesting story. And I'm obviously, Kill, kind of getting back the second chance and really running with it at a place where it's hard to win will definitely be intriguing to watch.
What can we expect out of Michigan State football this year?
This is probably the least I've been up on them in a minute. The thing with them is that, when they've been picked to do well and succeed and, maybe get a preseason AP poll ranking, at least the last like 5-6 years, they've been bad. And when people have kind of picked them, they're going to be terrible in the Big Ten, they've been pretty darn good. I think they were picked like last or like, second to last in the East when they won the Peach Bowl and won 11-2 with that terrific game over Michigan. I don't know a ton about their personnel right now. I don't even know who the starter is going to be between Noah Kim or Caden Hauser, but I don't know. They'll be interesting. I think they're going to be like a lot of teams. It's not going to be as bad as people think. It won't be as good as some people think.
He is the football beat writer at the Albuquerque Journal. His name is Sean Reider. Man, I can't thank you enough. I keep telling you this. We appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you guys having me on.
Thanks, Sean.